Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode on Founders Tribe, a podcast production presented by thestartupchef.com. This is once again your host, Sven Milder, and like every week, I invite inspiring global movers and shakers to the show to casually chat about successful strategies they have deployed to found and build awesome businesses and live fulfilling lives. At the Startup Chef, we are on a mission to elevate and inspire 100,000 founders globally to help them shortcut their road to success by offering easy access to investment capital and world-class expertise. If you want to discover more or download one of our free resources that can help you propel your business forward, visit us at thestartupchef.com. Thestartupchef.com. Now, without further ado, let's jump straight into today's episode. Okay, guys, thank you very much and welcome with a new podcast of the Startup Chef. Today we have David Abraham, an American from the East Coast who got hooked on Asia. While he was 4 years ago traveling through Southeast Asia, he started Outpost, which is a community for co-living in Asia, and he's doing very well with that, and we hear more. He was a consultant at the United Nations Support Facility for Indonesian Recovery. His years away from Asia took him from the White House to Wall Street, and then to Uganda to run a non-profit organization, worked at a university in Lithuania, and to just make everything very informal, took a second place in a slam dunk contest in high school. So let's first start with that, David. Took the second place in the slam dunk contest in the high school. I know that you are just as tall as I am, and thankfully the listeners cannot judge that, but the viewers as well as not. So how did you land up second place, and what was the occasion?
It was this is a long time ago, and a few inches ago. I was actually just a junior in high school, and our basketball team actually recruited a lot of folks who came to our school after graduation because they wanted one more year before they enter college. So we had a lot of people in our school, at least 12, who could all dunk. And I had just learned how to dunk the day before the event. Just made my first real solid dunk. And we had the event the next day, and everyone went out and didn't necessarily know the rules. And the rules were if you missed the dunk, well, then you were out of the competition. So out of these 13 people, I was number 13, and 10 out of the first 12 tried to do something very fancy and they missed. And so I made the dunk, and I was in the top 3. So wow. It was really a sign of just kind of do what you can and don't do anything fancy. And sure enough, the others will atrophy and you'll be there. So that's what I learned from that dunk contest.
Cool. So can we conclude that nobody really needs to have a long preparation, but just have faith in themselves?
Well, I was planning. Yeah, it's a little of that. I was planning on jumping off a platform, but as soon as I realized I just had enough ability to do it, then I didn't use a platform and just went ahead to see what I could do. So yeah. It's kind of how I live my life now, just seeing what I can do.
Awesome. And I also really like the fact when we were doing some research about you, of course, we know each other already for a while. When we dive a little bit more on the nitty-gritty details, something that really was intriguing me is like, okay, you're going from the White House to Wall Street, right? We are going to talk about a lot of things more, but can you just share a little bit more how that journey looked like for you?
Sure. I had been working in the office of the president and working on oil and gas issues, ensuring that the U.S. had a strong regulatory program for that. And then this was 2005, and I had switched portfolios and worked a bunch on foreign assistance in the Bush administration. And foreign assistance then was Iraq and Afghanistan and Colombia. So I worked on a lot of those foreign assistance issues for a few years, and was always very excited about how international relations meets international business. And so when there was an opportunity, this niche opportunity in finance at Lehman Brothers, go figure, for an analyst who could come around and understand how foreign governments would affect business and business investments, a small little group, I decided to join it. And it was just a small team of 3 or 4 people led by the former deputy director of the CIA. And we analyzed investment markets around the world. It was a fascinating opportunity.
You know, everybody else was talking about Wall Street and the White House, that those look like very prominent milestones, I can imagine. So I need to say I have myself not so much experience being like a hustler on Wall Street in that sense. Was there a lot of competition, I mean, between the traders and everybody wants to bring the big jackpot home, or how did you experience that?
But you do have the sense. I mean, there are a lot of big egos. There are actually a lot of big egos in both of those places. Yeah. I found Washington was an ego about power, and they necessarily didn't understand money and the value of money per se. And then the people in New York understood money, but not necessarily that pure power. But in Wall Street, it's fascinating because you have the opportunity to do very well, but most of the time people stay with what other people are doing. Because if you vantage out on your own and you fail, then you get beaten down. Well, why did you do that? So there is kind of, surprisingly enough, although there's the incentives to do something different, it's very hard to. Because of the if you do fail, then there's a lot of repercussions. So it's not as a supportive environment as you'd say entrepreneurship is, where people look at failure as an opportunity to grow. Oftentimes, at least in Wall Street in 2007, when you failed, that wasn't the learning experience. That was the last experience.
Yeah, and especially, I have been following you on social media, where you're currently very concerned about COVID, and was really informing your community very well, which also very much align what you do within Outpost. But bringing that back to the trading, I can imagine that currently, being a trader while the whole market is crashing in the United States, right, is a really shit hit the fan moment, where even that competition becomes way more worse. And I can imagine that currently you're happy to not be in that situation right now, right? Because what I actually hope myself to see after we are done with the whole COVID, or at least done, let's say we're recovering for it, is that people get a little bit better mindset what is real in life and what is not real in life. If you got my point, right? I'm just very curious if we're bringing it a little bit more forward. Like for me, trading has a lot of I don't want to say negativity, but it's like an empty world, right? Where you're chasing the money. And what we see as well, after you went back to Asia, and now especially with COVID, where there's so much more being aware of that we are entering a new world where things will be differently. So what is your take on that, right? How do you think the world will change after we are recovering from this virus?
Well, I think you do hit it on the head, that the street has a little bit of a different mentality. And it would be a crazy time to be there with all of the changes, although traders look at any volatility as a time as an opportune time. And people on Main Street don't necessarily look at the volatility as an opportunity. Entrepreneurs, however, tried to say, hey, what is the new world? What's the new opportunity? And I think what you had over the past 3 months or so was when you started in March, and people had this sense that something new was coming they didn't know, and it wasn't good. I remember March 11th, I think it was March 11th, at least in Asia, where the NBA season was canceled and Tom Hanks both got sick. And those were the 9th and 10th leading story on the New York Times. We just got inundated with so much news that every day was a new world. And that speed, and for us at Outpost, it's how do we respond? How do we respond to our community? How do we make sure everyone's safe? What can we do? And it was a hectic time. And I'm sure it was for everybody, but when you're leading an organization and people are looking for answers, that does come down to you. And so to be able to provide that, it was like every day was a new stimulus. And we've seen that pace of change, that every day is a new day, isn't necessarily the case now. I would say it's about every week or every 10 days. It's a new day. Things have slowed down a bit, and there's a little bit more that we can plan. Now, I'm not planning 5, 8, 10 months ahead with such certainty. It's still a week and a half, 2 weeks, a month. But back then it was about a day, 2 days. What could we expect? How could we shift? And that's really, really challenging. And I think, for me, the most challenging part was I was doing that away from where most of our operations were. And doing that remotely is something that's challenging when you're dealing with physical operation, for sure.
What my conclusion really is about the news, and maybe people will slap me for this, right? But that's fine. I don't mind to get slapped for my ass. But how I see literally the world is that if you analyze everything from the top, you have these billionaires, right? A lot of billionaires, and these billionaires own the news channels. But these billionaires also own a lot of ecosystems that are really bringing a lot of profits to them, right? And what I dare to believe is that the news needs to keep on running and pushing. The news needs to be brought out, right? And I sometimes tend to believe that it has two motivations. One, bring any news to the world. Doesn't matter who gets dirty hands, or as long as we have readers on our media platforms, and therefore we're able to sell advertising budgets, because the more dirty the news, and especially Al Jazeera was doing that, they're bringing in news to really put panic back into the people, right? But if you really see what is going on, then I'm wondering, like, okay, is it not all being blown up? And a good example of that is that one of my clients, it's a super smart guy. They have designed a tool through artificial intelligence and through satellites that by scanning locations in the world, they can typically track where the stock price is going. It's super high-end ex-Googler. And of course, when I was talking with this dude, I said, like, okay, have you also checked what happened in China? And with all of these ovens, right? And where China's on one hand saying like, oh, no, I have not done anything. So that's being brought into the news by the Chinese. But his conclusion was, through the satellite images and all the activities, that China was just lying, like crazy lying about all of those opportunities. So what I'm really afraid of is the media is hyping things up in order to control us as human beings, right? And you, leading Outposts, try to read between the lines as well by giving the right information to your crowd. And I'm just curious, you, from being as well very active in the United States, within the United Nations, have a great spectrum how things are working. How do you believe the news is influencing the decisions that people are making?
I also look at it as how much we're influencing the news, is with our own abilities through social media and so forth. I look at the media less as this controlling force, because the media isn't doing quite well in this struggle. And if you have billionaires who are investing in this world, and they said, hey, media is the way to go, I would argue that they've been doing a very poor job of it the last 20 years in terms of returning profits, and they might have been better investing elsewhere. What I do look in the media, and when I try and understand, is not just what's being covered, but what's not being covered. I think in the world today, we look at the shiny object. So as we're watching things around the globe unfold, all of a sudden you start to see the world pay less attention to Italy and Iran. We just forgot about Iran, if you will,
completely,
in terms of its COVID response. And now we're seeing us move towards more Latin America, and we're looking for more sensationalists news. I think that's just kind of who we are as a society, because we're looking for something that's fast. And so what I try and do is look at what's not being news. And I look at, well, India and how it's performing, or I look in other countries like Vietnam and how it's performing and how they're doing well. Korea, which has slipped from the news. Singapore, which has skyrocketed, had about 900 cases yesterday, but only 9 people in the ICU, and that number has dropped. So what's the disparity between the number of cases that they're finding versus the actual impact that it's having? So I think it's incumbent on us to say, all right, well, the media is covering on what people have responded to, whether it's the Malaysian Airlines crash, which CNN covered ad nauseum, or, hey, the caseloads are increasing. What scares me most is that especially in the US, the machinations with what's going on in the government and Trump sucks all of the air out of the discussion about how do we respond thoughtfully. So we're hearing about, does the president of the US wear a mask or not? Now, how is that helpful to me to respond to the crisis, to understand how big the crisis is? It doesn't.
As more like very much international relations orientated, then in 2016 you take the leap to actually jump out of that world, right? And start your own, which I think is awesome, co-working space all over Southeast Asia with venues currently in Bali and Cambodia. Can you tell us more about how that existed, right? How did you land it up from, if I may say, from trader, from very much in the UN, building a sophisticated network, and then going into more like the freestyle, living the life, worldwide nomad travelers, right? I think that's a very interesting jump.
Well, I've always been fascinated with Southeast Asia. I spent 97, 98 during what was a financial crisis here, traveling around 6 months around Southeast Asia. So I've always had this international exposure. And in 2010, I went to spend a year in Japan. So there's one little step between the Wall Street to Bali route, which took me to Japan. And while I was there, there was some challenge over what were called rare earth resources. So these are elements that make products lighter, faster, stronger. And it makes our modern technology and green technology possible. So I was very curious about them. And I had a fellowship which allowed me just to conduct research. So for the next 2.5 years, I traveled around the world to understand what these materials are and did some consulting and wrote a book. And during 2014 and 15, when I was traveling and working, I was like, wow, this is an amazing lifestyle. And so I wanted to set up a community for people like myself who are a little bit more professional, read a little touch older than 21, 22, and who actually had a career going. And so between when this book I was writing on this material was finished and or when I finished it and when it came out was about 8 months. And we decided, my partner and I, to open up a side project. And the side project was this community with LiveSpace and Workspace in Bali.
And we cannot call it a side project anymore, right? Or do you still consider it like that?
It's no longer the side project as of about 2018. And right now it's all encompassing, which is a wonderful thing. And with all the changes in lifestyle now, it's fabulous to be on the cusp of that.
Yeah. So what were the challenges when you, as a foreigner, started in Southeast Asia, a business, and can you share with us, like, okay, how did you attract your first customers and how did you really put yourself on the map?
Well, I think opening up a business in a foreign country can be considered a dumb idea. You say, hey, most businesses fail. Let me try to go to another country where I don't speak the language. I don't know the culture so well. Finance is different. Banking is completely different. I'm not sure of how to do anything regulatory. Let me go there. Let me see if I can start up a business.
Comes close to your dunking example.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't have experience. Let's just try it.
Right. Exactly. So I've always liked Indonesia. I've studied it. I came back to during several times for my writing, and I figured it's a great place. Why don't I see if I can hang out there and start a community?
Yeah.
So, everything is a challenge in another country. And then it's a developing market where rules feels like at times can be the spoken, written as they are spoken. You work through problems as they arise and you try and foresee them, but because it's not your culture or country, you can't foresee them as well. But then you're there for a while and you start to develop a rhythm. The services that we were offered were catering to people we knew. I had lived that lifestyle for 5 or 6 years. My partner, Brian, had lived them for 10. So while we didn't know the environment we were in, and we might have not known the hospitality business so well, we knew the product that we were trying to create. And that was really the way that put us forward. And then as we started to grow, we brought on people who knew things in areas that we did not, who could help us develop something a bit more standardized, so that the internet was always on and the services that people expected were there. So
So the first customers, right? Because I know your co-working spaces and co-living spaces very well, and your business model is really about acquiring and taking over the management of underperforming hotels or cottages or properties. But then still, you're starting that, and you're in one of the most beautiful places in the world, which is Bali. And yes, people can have drop-ins, and yes, people that but how do you advertise it, right? Did you advertise very deeply in the nomad community? I compare it almost like a gym membership, right? You need to let people know that you're there. And you started in a period where co-working and typically living the nomad lifestyle was just taking off, right? But if I would visit your venues, they're always packed to the roof, in a good way. I mean that. So it means that you have been doing something good, right? So what I'm really trying to discover is like, okay, what was your true activity that you have deployed, where suddenly you saw this hockey stick model where everything started working for you?
Well, I think one of the first things to acknowledge is that we weren't the first co-working space in Bali. Ubud was there, and Peter Wall was one of the founders and did an amazing job of really bringing people together. I was very impressed with what he did. There was also another place called Salty Volt, which was in Canggu, which was eventually taken over and which is now a dojo. But those places had deeper roots, had longer roots than we were. We weren't coming up with something new. What we were doing is coming up with our model. And our model always relied on the living aspect, the community aspect of an entire lifestyle, and of not just people who were coming through and just trying to get by, but people who wanted and aspired to make that a lifestyle, whether it was something they were able to do at the moment or something that they were going to do in the future. And what we found is that, we've gotten a little bit more of an established crowd. It's why Gojek was in our spaces, having an office. It's why people who are from Y Combinator had come through. It's why we have, offices and services that meet a slightly more professional crowd. But it is slow going. It's, it was a market that's not completely defined. And I think even now today, you have people who are becoming, they're coming out of the office, they're working from home, they're becoming these anywhere workers where they don't necessarily have to be at a specific location. So targeting those digitally becomes a little bit more of a challenge, because how do you target someone who has yet to make a decision about a lifestyle they've just not really heard about? So that's always been some of our challenges. So there's been, some media that drives people to the space. It's a constant challenge for us to get out in front of the right people. But the way we see it is that we're on this cusp of this wave, and the people who need to know about us found out about us on the various lifestyle platforms, where they're looking at certain media and they say, and then when people start thinking about co-living in Bali, we're the largest choice at the moment. and we've got an established community where people are going from place to place. I think what most inspires me is that when I was in Cambodia, when we had a property in the capital, people said, well, I didn't know much about Cambodia and wanted to come, and you're here, so I came. I meet people in Bangkok, and I was on the MRT a few weeks ago, and someone said, hey, you're the Outpost guy, with my partner. The sense is that people are understanding there's a brand out there that's catering towards a younger generation who are working and living, whether they're doing that for weeks or months or years, and we're here to support that lifestyle.
Yeah, what I really like is that if you see the agenda from your community, from your co-working space, it's not just bring your laptop and sit down and do your work. No, you host all kinds of events that are catered to uplifting the knowledge in any kind of area, how to arrange your finances remotely. You're bringing in speakers. So people are constantly actually thrilled and inspired to become in what can be seen sometimes a lonely experience into making easy friends and getting very quickly adapted to this new lifestyle of living, which I think is truly awesome. So what is your aspirations with growing it all over Southeast Asia? I mean, what is the larger vision of Outpost?
Well, we've always looked at ourselves as a company that's supporting the lifestyle. People who've worked away from the office, these anywhere workers. And we provided living and working and travel services to meet that. Now we come to a time where for the next 6 months to 3 years to who knows how long, some of those ability to travel freely are restricted. And we've been working on projects over the past few months that focus on what do people do that 10 months a year they're not with us. How do we keep them engaged? How do we support that lifestyle? So what you'll see over the next few months are the fruits of those labors, if you will, and how do we keep people connected?
How do you do that? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think we look at what our community values. They value the ability to explore the world, to grow personally and professionally, so that they can be anywhere, and then connect with others who share their values and connect with places that they go. And so how do we do that on an online setting? How do we bring communities together? At Outpost, we just don't have individuals coming. We have companies coming. We have training courses coming. And so when they come together, they're excited to meet the others within their group, like a travel group like Unsettled or Hackers Paradise. They come as a group, and they want to meet each other, but they're also interested in meeting other people. So how do we bring that same experience online, and how do we get that same connection? Those are the things that we're thinking through and looking forward to delivering. Yeah.
So can we see Outposts starting in Vietnam, Malaysia, even in Singapore, where you are right now? So there's really, because what I really like is that if you have this Outpost membership, you can just go wherever you're treated best in this sense. And that's, of course, an awesome experience, right? I mean, the fact that you say, okay, we open something in Phnom Penh, which I think will be a new hub, definitely for sure. I've been myself twice in Cambodia. It would be great to have this freedom for people to just say, like, okay, oh, because Outpost is already there, it makes it easier for me actually to feel home, right? So do you have aspirations to open up other locations?
Well, we feel that Outpost reduces the switching costs, for sure. Yeah. Because anytime you pull up into a new area, it's like, oh, where do I stay? All right, how do I get the best deal? Where do I find friends? Where do I? And that takes a while to do. But when you know, all right, you're getting to an Outpost, you know that the types of people you want to hang out are there. You know you're going to be able to find a bed that's comfortable, whether you want to be there for 3 days or 3 months. You can ease into these new places because of what you expect is there. Now, people say, well, I can do that on myself, and I can do that more cheaply, or I can get a different view, and I can get a place that fits my needs. But my experience about moving into a new city that first day, or into a new country that first day, is really hard to find all of those things that you want. And it takes a long time. And when you're trying to live a professional lifestyle, how long do you want to look for that villa right off the bat when you don't even know, you don't even know what the currency is, or what a million is, or what 100 is of this rupiah or dong. It doesn't make sense to you. So we're there to help support the community. And we feel that we offer a product that's helpful for people when they're trying to transition to new places.
Awesome, yeah. So one of the visions, or the vision that we are striving for, is literally to elevate and inspire founders globally. And definitely one of these things is that raising capital is always an important matter. And we have discussed about this in another conversation we have. I'm just curious, like when WeWork was getting hit by the fan, right? So how did that affect your fundraising in a way? And were investors skeptic, and how did you deal with that? Do you have some tips for us?
You remember when we were talking about Wall Street, and then when everyone is thinking a certain way, and the other people like to think that certain way because it becomes easier. And so you had that when people when people would look at us, and if they heard that it was co-working, some would stay away. Other people would double down. Like right now, the hospitality industry has never been more battered. And ultimately, in some way, we're providing a place, we're providing a pillow, and we're providing a community, and we're providing food, and we're providing a place to work. And we're hospitality. But even though the industry's gotten hammered, people are still interested. Hey, what's going on here? Because they see these long-term trends. But when it was WeWork, there was already someone to look at and say, all right, well, that model didn't fail, so let me stay away from that word. It's hard to say if one failure of one company brings down the whole industry, because I flash forward to right now where one virus brought down the whole sector, but yet there's a little bit more interest. So I think what you have is this general, what is the group think of investors? What are they thinking about, and how are they interpreting what's going on? And so right now there's a sentiment that there's more interest around co-living. I don't know.
Which you also have, right? So no problem.
So no problem, but that's what we were before. So all of a sudden, people want to lift up the sheets. So, it goes me back to my mining days. And this is a strange example because it may not make sense for most folks. But when mining companies go out and they find a deposit, what's fascinating about a certain deposit is that it's not just rich in one mineral or one metal, it's rich in many. So what could be a mine that mines iron, for example, and people say, hey, this is an iron mine. 3 years later, the iron mine prices drop, and someone says, hey, this mine is a new rare earth mine. And so to change it's the same piece of ground, but they've just labeled it differently. So I think what that happens with business and startups too, if people have to understand that they might have to relabel their offering to fit the market, which sounds a little counterintuitive. I
couldn't really agree more with that. And it comes actually back to what we were discussing 20 minutes ago about the press and actually storytelling, right? It's about how the story is being told, and then people pick out their small little pieces from the story, and they decide, okay, this is the new label. And when I'm helping clients as well, a lot with their fundraising, sometimes they have amazingly cool technology. So the same like the Google guy that is typically able to make scans from the world and decide, okay, what will the stock price be in 90 days? And then it's also always comes back to, okay, you make it or very complicated, or you try to have that one-liner, that story where everyone is relating to. So if you have a pitch deck and you have on the first page something like, okay, the technology that you're always 90 days ahead of the stock market, well, every investor, first of all, will think like, oh, that is something that grabs the attention, right? So it's very much about how to tell the stories in a correct way that you can engage and resonate actually very, very well with the person that you're talking to, right? I mean, that's the same example that you're currently giving.
And the other thing that I do is when I sit down with folks, whether they're potential investors or people who are interested in the story, and I ask them, what about Outpost interests you? The presentation I'm about to give isn't quite right. I can change it. I mean, why do I want to, if they have a storyline in their head that's also one that we have, it's not like, hey, get off the, but there, each one of us has a storyline. And just like you looked at me and tried to bring a storyline, each person has many storylines, so each company does. And so what's the one that resonates with them? And they have an investment thesis, and you're going to have different investors who have different theses. But how does it relate to what you're about to tell? So I'm open to sitting down with someone, but I try and ask them why they're sitting down with me.
Well, that's good. So because too often it happens that founders trying to really convince someone, right? Almost putting themselves very vulnerable and please give me the money. But I guess you're hitting the spot right. A good investor in this sense, it's basically a marriage, right? It's a partnership for a long time. You better work well. So asking them, why do you like our business and what can you bring to the table and how would you like to see this forward? I think that's one of the crucial things to bring a good partnership a long way. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
And it also gets a sense of, have these people done any research into you? Are they just mining you for information? Then you can end the meeting quite quickly if they say something that doesn't align with what you're doing. It's important to know why you're meeting or you're speaking to someone. So it's as much of your time as it is theirs.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, talking about that specifically, and we jumped into it for a small moment, but I'm very curious, what is your vision how actually work will change post-COVID, right? I have my thoughts about that, and it makes me extremely excited. But you are really into the scene, right? And you feel exactly where it's going. And I think the main thing that every company worldwide is experiencing currently is that they were very reluctant to say like, everybody needs to work from home. The whole fortress falls down, right? But I think that everybody finds out that there's an amazing life balance happening currently, and that people actually are super productive being home and working remotely. So that should be for you when this is all calming down. I think that should fly, right? And I'm very curious, like, can you walk me in detail over how will work be differently after we are settling down from this COVID?
I would love to say, hey, this is how it is, but there are a couple of things that I keep in mind. One, that this is not normal times. That people are working from home, but it's not out of a desire, it's out of necessity. And the systems are still coming together. There are definitely technological concerns of security that will challenge us. And the experiences that we're having now are just not in any way normal. But what I do see is that people at least have come to realize that working from a same location on a consistent basis daily is not something that has to be the case. So is it the question of, or we take Facebook's lead, or we take something like Buffer, which doesn't have an office and never really will, and that's the way companies will go? No, I don't think that's the case. I think that we'll get to a point where people are like, hey, I like this remote stuff. I want to do it on my terms, but there will be some challenges. And these are the challenges that we see as nomadic workers. There's going to be a lot of concern about how do you keep company culture? How do you keep people together? How do you deal with isolation? How do you deal with people who don't feel a part of the company? How do you do that in a non-physical place? And no matter how empowering it is to control your time and to be where you want to be, there's an excitement and enthusiasm you have when you're in the same room with someone that can never be shared when over a laptop. And so there's some trade-offs that we're going to have to give up. And I believe that over time that there'll be a push back. If there's a great push to be away from the office, there'll be this gradual retreat to the office, because offices are not just places of work; they're social. And whether you're farming from the Stone Age, you met people at work in some way. So I do see a world where offices become more networks than physical places. I see that offices themselves, which have spent a long time catering to the needs of the company, will start to cater more towards the needs of the individual. I see offices becoming spaces that people may go to socially. Which may sound strange. But if the offices serve the needs of the individual and the individual wants to have a movie night, they might say, hey, well, why don't you come to my office? Which seems strange now, but when I look in the future, the office has a different ring to it. So I think there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of trends, but those are some that I see, is that the office is not going to be a set place for people to work.
And I think also the CEOs of these companies will be a bit more flexible when it comes to, you need to be in at 9 and you can go out at 6. I think that there will be way more freedom for people, but there's constantly a touchdown, a connection moment, a social moment, like you're mentioning. And on top of that, I was reading on one of the LinkedIn posts, is like, there was this guy saying, like, okay, the new way of coming into the office, you park your car in the garage, and then you have on your smartphone, you can see, okay, floor number 3 and 8 still contain sufficient amount of spaces, and the other ones are all being filled up. And there's movement sensors that if you are too close to each other, right?
Let's hope that's a very short term. Pandemic type response, but I hope in the long term it's not so not so drastic.
Just like you say, right? I mean, Buffer is working 100% remotely. I don't know if you hear about as well, Twitter, Jack Dorsey, they thought, like, okay, screw it, we're leaving Silicon Valley and we're just going to be more scattered, right? I think the sweet spot is maybe in the middle, that people can say, like, oh, let me go to Asia, let me figure out a little bit myself, let's do some meditation, let's hit some home runs with all of the Outpost co-working spaces. And then there are times that I'm more engaging in the office, in the city life, and therefore have more freedom. At least maybe I would love to see it in that sense, right?
Here the question I have, which I think gets less attention, isn't necessarily what's the company going to do. It's what's the career path going to be, and how long do they stay with companies, and how do people learn and progress? Are they responsible for providing them growth opportunities? And how does, the bigger question is, how does health insurance work in an environment where people are traveling around? And I think we sit and we focus on what we can, because it makes sense to think about, people aren't going to come into the office, so they can work from anywhere. But I think there are a lot of other hidden things that need to be thought through. The movement of labor, where people are taxed from. All of these things will have larger implications that are waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah. So what are the current things that you're really excited about? I mean, you're currently, maybe also nice to share to the listeners as well, right? It's like, when we started this conversation, you say, like, okay, it was my idea to go to the US, but I'm getting stuck with jeans shirts in Singapore.
We've been at Outpost. We've been keeping an eye on the pandemic since January, when we ordered our first box of masks. And since then, we were working on social distancing with our staff before we even knew there was a word called social distancing. So we were quite conscious of it. And I had left Bali in early March because I was planning to get back to the States. But as our company was mostly based out of here, I didn't want to be in a different time zone. So I never took that connecting flight. And I've been based out of Singapore. So I'm in my space here, but I don't have all my clothes are in Bali. So, I've been here for 3 months, 2.5 months, 3 months now. And, I'm full up for winter clothes, but been holed up here with hardly anything. So it's been a little bit of a challenging situation with everything closed.
Have you discovered new hobbies in this isolation? Running. Cool. I don't like it, but I like to have done it. And so I run on a regular basis now, and I never thought I would. So paradoxically, my step count is, this month is almost about 15,000 steps a day. And wow, that's far above the average.
And most of that is running or walking in the house. This is the longest time I've sat down. So, so those are what I've done to try and keep sane, and I try and keep a routine, the basic things. Other people are slowly emerging from the lockdown. In Singapore, we've got another month. So, I'm still doing those same routine things to keep myself going.
Awesome. So one of the things that I would like to, also with respect of your time, would like to ask you, when we did some research as well, we would find out you're using struggle in a positive sense because nothing rewarding comes easily. That is, So can you, I will explain it one more time. So David is using struggle in a positive sense because nothing rewarding comes easily. I would really love to hear a little bit more about your perspective on that. Yeah.
I mean, you can look at it like climbing a mountain, or going back to I don't like to actually run, but I like to have run. You feel good after you put in effort and something were to materialize. If someone comes in and gives you the reward without doing the work, it's nice, but it doesn't feel like you've earned it. So the struggle, the quest for knowledge, the going around, the small failures, the setbacks, they make the reward that much nicer. It's almost like for Scandinavian folk, the summers are so much more rewarding when the weather's 28, 29. But in Singapore, when the weather's 28, 29, it's called Thursday. It's every day. So if you go up to colder weather environments and they go there for the summer, man, it's awesome. People earned it. So it's that same type of feeling.
Yeah. So what kind of big experiences have you still on your bucket list that need to push you out of the comfort zone and that you definitely want to check box in the coming years to go?
Well, Sven, I would say right now I'm out of my comfort zone. Leading through a pandemic is something that's new. It's challenging, and I'm happy. I'm not happier. I feel in terms of being more thoughtful, I can now. In the beginning of March, we had to often make decisions before decisions were made for us. And an example of that is, travel. We saw that the world was going to get shut down. So we had to make immediate decisions about where staff was, where they were going to stay, before the decisions were made for us. And now we're at a point where we have a little bit more flexibility, so we can be a little bit more thoughtful about where we're going, but still decisions are being made faster. And so, one of my challenges is how to decide this is enough information that I need to make a decision based on an uncertain future. So that's kind of what that's kind of the challenge I see is going forward. And we'll know in retrospect if I made the right decisions. But what I'm really happy about in the future is the opportunity to support more people who want to live a lifestyle of exploration, and still growing and connecting with others. I'm excited to have the opportunity to bring back staff who've taken time away. and being able to support our staff through this hard times. I mean, my most rewarding opportunity over the past month isn't about the spaces that are opening in Outpost again and the community coming back, but it was finding the opportunity for some jobs for our current staff who we can't employ at the moment.
So I think that we can say that we're very lucky, because I was doing some research, or actually better, my girlfriend was doing some research, and there is a survey where, quite a big survey, where they ask, what's the first holiday destination that you will visit after the pandemic? So that was Bali, right? And all of the people want to go to Bali for one simple reason, because I like to say we, because we are both living here as well. You're currently now in Singapore, but everybody thinks, okay, the Balinese have handled this so professionally in a very intimate way through their village heads, and therefore we have been able to keep it really relatively low profile. So all of the people worldwide, and thankfully also news has suddenly did something positive, and they were distributing the news worldwide, even on Bloomberg, that Bali was one of the places that was able to suppress the pandemic and the COVID, right? So I think once this is all settled, and once people can buy their tickets again, their airline tickets, I think we will go back to normal. You get a very busy time, especially after we hosted this podcast. Everybody wants to check out how it is to live this lifestyle. I would really like to thank you for sharing more about Outpost, your vision about how work in the future will change. Is there anything that you currently like to share with the audience? Something that is dying? You think like, okay, I wanna. This is your moment. This is your red carpet moment.
We're excited that people will have more opportunity of choice on how they live their lives, and to realize that the work is an important part. And I just hope that it can help. I hope Outpost can fill a part in these people's lifestyle to allow them to live with purpose, but also still contribute to the work that they do every day. So we'll be here in Southeast Asia for them, and excited to welcome people out.
Cool. So my last question is, where can people find you if they want to know more about you? LinkedIn.
To know more about me from a business sense, it's LinkedIn. But if it's about our company, then they should go to destinationoutpost.co, and we're there.
I'm making sure to be putting these links in the show notes. David Abraham, thank you very much for joining me as a guest on the Startup Chef podcast. Talk to you soon, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning in today at the Founders Tribe podcast. I truly hope you have found some inspiration and the golden nuggets so you can leverage this to lift your founders game. By the way, if you want to stay updated about our weekly releases, then please hit the subscribe button so you will never ever need to miss out, and choose which one of the guests you can tune into. If you're planning to raise capital for your startup and would love to discover if you are fundraise ready, if your startup has what it takes, then please take our free signature fundraise quiz, where we will benchmark your answers against our 9-step Date Your Investor framework. As a result, you will receive a 20-page tailor-made recommendation report to be better tomorrow. Want to find out more? Go to www.thestartupchef.com, www.thestartupchef.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode.